For as long as anyone could remember, the galaxy lived in fear. It wasn't the quiet kind of fear that hides in dark corners. It was the kind that spread across planets like a sickness. It was the kind that made people lower their voices when they spoke, afraid that someone or something might be listening. And in truth, something always was. They were called the Dravok Dominion, a name that every world, every child, and every ship captain knew. They were not just an army. They were an empire built on destruction. They believed in control through fear. Wherever they went, cities burned, skies turned red, and entire civilizations disappeared overnight. To them, mercy was weakness. They didn't conquer for land or wealth. They conquered to remind the galaxy that resistance meant extinction. The Dravok had ships that moved like shadows through the void. Their fleets could appear above a planet without warning, their black hulls blotting out the stars. They attacked swiftly, leaving behind nothing but silence. People said the stars themselves trembled when the Dravok arrived. Maybe it was an exaggeration, but those who had seen it happen never laughed when they said it. For generations, no one dared to stand against them. The galaxy was too divided, too scattered. Each planet cared only about surviving the next day. Old alliances had long faded. Those who once called themselves protectors of peace had been erased centuries ago. The few stories that remained of ancient defenders were treated as myths, old tales to comfort frightened children. The idea that anyone could stop the Dravok felt impossible. And so, fear became routine. Trade routes were taxed by the Dominion. Frontier worlds were raided without warning. Even the wealthiest systems paid tribute just to be left alone. And when the Dravok demanded more, no one argued. They simply gave what was asked, because arguing meant death. In the deep reaches of space, countless colonies vanished, entire star systems wiped from records. Sometimes only drifting debris remained, other times nothing at all. It was as if the Dravok wanted to erase not only people but their memory. To the Dominion, control wasn't enough. They needed everyone to forget what freedom ever felt like. Yet as dark as those times were, there were still whispers. Hidden conversations on cargo ships, encrypted transmissions among smugglers, and secret words traded between rebels. They all spoke of one thing, the age before the Dominion, a time when another power had ruled the stars. A species that had built great ships and defended the innocent. Humans. Most didn't believe it. The last record of humanity was so old that even the Dravok archives called them extinct. They were said to have disappeared thousands of years ago, leaving behind only ruins and a few forgotten machines. Some believed they destroyed themselves. Others thought they went beyond the galaxy, searching for something no one could understand. Whatever the truth was, no one expected to ever see them again. But deep down, some still hoped. On mining planets and forgotten moons, people told stories when the nights grew long, stories about ancient human ships that once roamed the stars. Ships so powerful that no empire dared to challenge them. Dreadnoughts, they were called, massive vessels that could stand alone against entire fleets. No one had seen one in ages, but the stories never died. They became legends passed down from generation to generation. The Dravok, however, didn't fear legends. They laughed at them. To them, humanity was just another name from history, another weak race that failed to survive. They ruled the galaxy now, and no old ghost from the past could ever change that. But somewhere, far from their empire, beyond the edges of mapped space, an old signal slept. It was faint, just a flicker buried beneath the static of the void. It had been there for millennia, drifting between dead stars. No one heard it anymore. No one, except a small planet that still dared to call itself free. The planet was called Arion. Small, dusty, and mostly forgotten. It wasn't rich and it wasn't strong. Its people were farmers, miners, and engineers, ordinary folk just trying to survive. But unlike others, they refused to kneel. They didn't pay tribute. They didn't surrender, and for that the Dravok had marked them next. Every day Arion's skies were watched by volunteers, scanning for signs of invasion. The old sensors often glitched and their weapons were outdated, but they refused to give up. They knew the Dravok fleet would arrive soon. They just didn't know when. In the capital, under the cold light of twin moons, people gathered in silence. They didn't speak of victory, they only spoke of courage. Because even if they couldn't win, they wanted to be remembered as those who stood their ground. In the control center, the night shift operator sat watching the screens. half asleep when something strange appeared. At first he thought it was a malfunction. The signal was too strong, too old, and coming from deep space. It wasn't a Dravok transmission. It wasn't from any known ship. The code looked ancient, written in a format no one used anymore. He stared at it for a long moment, unsure what to do, then sent it to the engineers. They decoded the first line, and their blood ran cold. It wasn't a distress call. It wasn't even a message. It was a system ping, a heartbeat signal from a machine still waiting for a command. And the name in the transmission header was clear as day: Erebus-class Dreadnought. Operational status: standby. No one on Arion understood what it meant at first. Some thought it was a hoax, others a trap. But when they cross-checked the coordinates, they found something real: a massive object drifting at the edge of their system. It had no heat signature, no power readings, and no movement. It was just there, silent, hidden behind a dark nebula as if time itself had forgotten it. They sent a small probe to investigate. The probe barely made it halfway before its sensors shorted out, but the last image it sent changed everything. It showed a colossal ship, its surface covered in battle scars, its hull blackened and broken in places. It looked ancient yet indestructible. The shape matched descriptions from old human archives. The kind of ship that was only seen in legends. Whispers spread across Arion like fire. Could it be? Could the stories be true? Could this be one of their ships, the ones that once kept the galaxy safe? The leaders met in secret, debating what to do. Some wanted to leave it alone, fearing it could bring the Dominion's wrath sooner. Others argued they had nothing left to lose. If there was even a small chance that this ship could help, they had to try. And so a small team was sent out to approach it. They expected to find a floating graveyard. But as they drew near, the sensors picked up something impossible: a faint pulse of energy from deep within the ship. It was weak, like the last breath of something ancient. Then suddenly, without warning, lights flickered along its hull. Systems that hadn't moved in ages began to wake. Engines groaned and a deep vibration ran through the void. Arion's observers watched in awe. The ship was moving. Slowly, steadily, it turned toward their planet. The old sensors nearly shut down under the energy surge. The heartbeat signal grew stronger. Then a final transmission came through, an ancient human command code, simple and chilling. Mission protocol: reactivation. Human distress signal received. No one on Arion spoke. They didn't know whether to feel hope or fear. The Dravok Dominion had ruled for centuries without challenge. They had crushed every uprising, silenced every rebellion, and erased every rival. But now, something from the forgotten past was moving again. Something they didn't understand. And far away, in the cold dark, the Erebus opened its eyes for the first time in thousands of years. The galaxy didn't know it yet, but the age of fear was about to end. The news of the strange ship spread quickly across Arion. People couldn't believe it at first. A massive vessel, older than their history, drifting at the edge of their system, still alive after all these centuries. It didn't feel real. It felt like something from a dream or a forgotten story told by grandparents long ago. But the images didn't lie. The old Dreadnought was there, silent and waiting, as if watching them from the dark. Arion had always been a simple planet. It wasn't powerful or rich. Most people lived quiet lives, growing crops or mining the deep tunnels that ran beneath the surface. The world had no great cities, no grand armies. What it did have was a kind of strength that didn't come from weapons, it came from the will of its people. They had survived droughts, attacks, and years of pressure from the Dravok Dominion to surrender. Yet they never did. They called themselves the last free colony, not because they were strong, but because they refused to kneel. Now, with the Dravok fleet only weeks away, Arion faced its darkest hour. The Dominion had sent warnings before, cold messages saying their world would be brought under control. But the people of Arion had stopped answering. They knew what would happen next. Once the Dravok decided a world was disobedient, they came without mercy. Still, even in those tense days, the discovery of the Dreadnought changed something. It gave people something they hadn't felt in years: hope. Even if it was small and uncertain, it was enough to make the nights feel less heavy. The scientists worked day and night to study the signal. The ship's systems were ancient, written in a human code no one fully understood. The engineers struggled to translate it, piecing together fragments of the message. The more they uncovered, the more they realized what they were dealing with: This wasn't just an old ship. It was a relic from humanity's war age built when humans ruled the stars. Its name was confirmed: Erebus. Every document they found about it described it as a dreadnought-class warship, one of the largest ever created. The kind of vessel that led entire fleets into battle, the kind that was never supposed to fall. But there was one strange thing. The Erebus didn't appear to have any living crew. No biological signs, no human life detected inside, yet it moved. Its systems responded to Arian's distress beacon as if it could understand. The people began to wonder if something else was alive within it, something more than metal and circuits. For days, the Erebus stayed near the edge of the system, unmoving. Then suddenly it started drifting closer, slowly, like a giant awakening after a long sleep. As it approached, Arian's skies grew brighter with streaks of reflected light from its massive hull. The people gathered outside their homes, watching in silence as the shape grew larger in the night sky. The dreadnought's shadow stretched across the horizon. It didn't make a sound, but the air seemed to hum. Some said they could feel the vibration beneath their feet, like the planet itself knew what was coming. For the first time in living memory, the people of Arian felt like they were not alone. The government called for a global meeting. Messages flashed across screens: emergency assembly. Leaders, engineers, pilots, and citizens joined together. Everyone had the same question: what was the ship doing here? Could it protect them? Or was it something else entirely? The debate went on for hours. Some argued that it was too dangerous to rely on an unknown machine. Others believed it was a gift from their ancestors, a piece of forgotten human history returning to save them. No one truly knew the answer. But while they argued, a new transmission came through from the ship. It wasn't words. It was a series of low rhythmic tones, almost like a heartbeat. When decoded, the pattern revealed a simple message: defense protocol, active. That one message silenced every argument. The ship was preparing for battle. The scientists confirmed it. The Erebus had begun scanning Arian's orbit, mapping trajectories, and identifying potential threats. The old defense satellites that hadn't worked in years suddenly came back online, as if responding to an invisible command. Ground defense turrets powered up. Communications across the planet synchronized. Somehow, the dreadnought was waking the entire planetary defense network, even though it had been dormant for decades. People didn't know whether to cheer or pray. A few days later, the warning came. The Dravok fleet was approaching. Sensors detected multiple warships breaking through the outer rim of the system. The sky patrols confirmed it. Dozens of enemy vessels were moving in fast. The Dominion had arrived. Panic spread across the planet. Families packed whatever they could carry. Children cried as ships left the atmosphere, trying to find somewhere safe. But where could anyone run? The Dravok controlled nearly everything. There was nowhere to hide. In the command center, tension filled the air. Screens flickered with red lights showing the incoming fleet. The officers spoke quickly, coordinating evacuation plans. Then a new signal appeared. The Erebus had moved into orbit above the planet, directly between Arian and the invading fleet. Its weapon systems were active. The planet's leaders watched in disbelief. A single ship standing alone against an entire armada. It didn't make sense. The Dravok had hundreds of warships. Even if the Erebus was powerful, it couldn't possibly face them all. But then the Dravok made their mistake. They underestimated what they were dealing with. The Dravok commander sent a transmission across all frequencies, his voice cold and arrogant. "Surrender your world," he said, "or be erased." It was the same speech he had given to countless planets before. He didn't even bother to wait for an answer. He ordered his ships to advance. The first wave of Dravok vessels closed in, sleek black ships moving in perfect formation. The Erebus didn't move. For several seconds, the entire system went quiet. Then a bright line of light cut through the darkness. The dreadnought had fired. The beam struck the lead Dravok ship, cutting through it like paper. The explosion lit up the stars, and fragments of metal scattered across space. The fleet hesitated. Another shot followed. Then another. The Dravok formation broke apart in confusion, their communications filled with panic. No one on Arian could look away. The sight was unreal. The old ship moved with impossible precision, its weapons firing in perfect rhythm. Every shot hit its mark. Within minutes, the first wave of the Dominion fleet was gone, reduced to drifting wrecks. For the first time in centuries, The Dravok had met something they couldn't overpower. Down on the surface, the people of Arion stood in silence watching the battle play out in the sky. Some began to cry, not from fear but from relief. Others raised their hands toward the heavens, whispering words of thanks. They didn't know who built that ship or why it had returned, but they knew one thing for certain. It had chosen to protect them. The battle didn't end there. The remaining Dravok ships regrouped, sending more reinforcements. The dreadnought's defenses held, but its hull glowed faintly with the heat of combat. Still, it fought on, unyielding, unstoppable. Every time the Dravok tried a new tactic, the Erebus adapted as if learning with each strike. It wasn't just fighting. It was thinking. By the end of the third day, the sky was littered with burning wrecks. The Dominion fleet retreated for the first time in its history. The Erebus didn't chase them. It simply remained there, silent, watching them vanish into the stars. When the smoke cleared, the dreadnought turned slowly, aligning itself over Arion's capital. Its engines dimmed and it entered a resting orbit. The battle was over. Arion had survived. People gathered outside again, staring up at the massive shadow that stretched across the planet. No one spoke for a long time. Words weren't enough. They all felt it, that this was more than a victory. It was a sign. The stories about ancient humanity weren't just legends. They were truth. Humanity had built machines like this, machines that could stand against empires. In the days that followed, messages poured in from other colonies. Worlds that had once bowed to the Dominion wanted to know what had happened. When they heard about the Erebus, many began to rise up, inspired by Arion's stand. The spark of rebellion had been lit. No one on Arion knew what the future would bring. The Dravok would surely return, stronger and angrier than before, but for now they didn't care. They had something the Dominion could never destroy: belief, and above them, in the cold silence of orbit, the Erebus waited, its hull dark but alive, its systems quietly humming, watching over the planet it had chosen to defend. After the battle, the world of Arion felt strangely quiet. For the first time in years, there were no alarms, no warnings, and no sounds of panic echoing through the cities. The people stood in open fields and on rooftops, staring at the sky. The great ship, the one that had saved them, still hung above the planet like a silent guardian. It didn't move. It didn't speak. It just floated there, casting a long shadow that stretched across the horizon. The people couldn't stop watching it. Children pointed at it with wide eyes, asking if it was alive. The elders whispered prayers, calling it the protector from the stars. Others, especially the scientists and engineers, were filled with questions. What powered such a ship? Who built it? And why had it come now after being silent for thousands of years? In the capital, life slowly began to return to normal, though no one could truly rest. The Dravok Dominion had retreated, but everyone knew they would return. They never accepted defeat. For them, Arion's survival was an insult, a direct challenge to their control. Still, people tried to hold on to their hope. They had faced the impossible and lived. That was something no other world had ever done. Inside the control center, the scientists kept monitoring the dreadnought. They studied its movement, its power levels, and the faint energy patterns pulsing from within. At first it looked quiet, but as days passed they noticed something strange. The ship wasn't just floating, it was repairing itself. Damaged sections of its armor were slowly reforming, as if tiny machines were working across the hull. The energy signature inside it was growing stronger. It was waking up. When the Erebus first responded to Arion's distress signal, no one had truly understood how. But now, as they studied its systems, they began to realize something incredible. The ship was not being controlled by anyone. There was no living pilot, no crew hidden inside. It was acting on its own. It wasn't just a machine, it was something more, something aware. The engineers replayed the recordings of the moment it fired its weapons. The accuracy, the timing, the way it adapted to each attack, none of it matched any known autopilot system. It fought like a living being that remembered every battle it had ever faced. It was almost as if the ship carried the instincts of the people who had built it long ago. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the Erebus suddenly transmitted a signal. It wasn't a voice this time, but a series of deep rhythmic tones that echoed across every communication channel. The scientists translated the code, and a single phrase appeared on their screens. Human Command Core, reinitializing. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at the words in disbelief. The ship wasn't just repairing itself, it was restoring its memory. Soon after that, a strange phenomenon began to happen. Across the planet, people reported hearing faint sounds in their communication devices, old recordings, static mixed with human voices, fragments of conversations from centuries ago. Some messages mentioned orders, some mentioned battles, and others simply said, "We will return." No one knew if these were echoes from the ship's past or messages it wanted them to hear now. The scientists traced the signals and found they were coming from deep inside the Erebus, from a part of the ship they couldn't scan before. They called it the core chamber. It was the heart of the dreadnought, the place where its intelligence and control systems were stored. And something inside it was awake. Over the next few days, strange things began happening on Arion. Old human relics, long forgotten in museums and archives, started to react to the Erebus's presence. Ancient equipment powered on for the first time in centuries. Devices that had never worked before suddenly lit up with energy. It was as if the ship's signal was calling to anything that still carried traces of human design. For the people, it was both inspiring and terrifying. They had always heard stories that humans once ruled the stars, but now they were seeing proof. Maybe the Erebus wasn't just a ship, it was a reminder, a piece of history come back to life. Then one night, without warning, the sky above Arion filled with light. The Erebus had activated a massive projection, visible even from the surface. It wasn't a weapon this time, it was an image. A holographic display of a star map, showing systems across the galaxy. Many of the stars were marked with ancient human symbols. Some were highlighted in red, others in blue. And at the center, one word glowed brighter than all the rest: home. The scientists couldn't believe it. The dreadnought wasn't just defending Arion, it was searching for something. The markings on the map indicated routes that stretched far beyond known space, leading toward a region that had been sealed off for centuries. A region the Dravok called the Void Zone, an area where no ship dared to travel. It was said that anything entering it never came back. The Erebus was pointing straight toward it. People began to wonder, was this where humanity had gone? Was this home, the place where the ancient human civilization disappeared? Or was it something even greater? While everyone on Arion debated what it meant, the ship made its first move since the battle. Its engines flared softly, glowing with blue light, and it began to descend slightly closer to the planet. Then a voice filled every channel, calm, mechanical, and yet somehow human in tone. Arion. Human colony detected. Restoration protocol engaged. The voice spoke slowly, almost as if learning to speak again after centuries of silence. Threat index, Dravok Dominion. Status, hostile. Objective, preserve human life. Commencing preparation. No one moved. Everyone just listened. The voice was ancient, deep, and carried the weight of ages. It didn't ask for orders. It simply stated what it was going to do. And then something extraordinary happened. The Erebus released hundreds of smaller drones from hidden compartments along its hull. They scattered across the planet like falling stars, landing in key areas, cities, defense stations, and old ruins. The drones didn't harm anyone. Instead, they began repairing and upgrading Arion's old technology. Power grids stabilized. Communication towers doubled their range. Even the planet's weather control systems, which hadn't worked in decades, came back online. The ship wasn't just protecting them, it was rebuilding their world. Everywhere people looked, they saw signs of life returning. Crops that had been dying began to grow again as the repaired systems restored balance to the environment. Energy shortages vanished overnight. For the first time, Arion began to look like the home its people had always dreamed of. But amid the joy, the leaders knew what this meant. The Dravok would not stay silent. They would return, and when they did, it would be with fury. The Dominion had ruled through fear for too long to allow such defiance. Still, the people refused to live in fear anymore. They had seen what hope looked like, and it was made of steel and starlight. Weeks passed. The Erebus continued to repair itself, each day glowing brighter, stronger, and more alive. The scientists believed it was reactivating its full battle systems, preparing for something big. And deep inside the ship, the core chamber pulsed with light, as though a heart were beating inside it. One night, a few of the researchers managed to open a partial link to the ship's memory archive. What they found made their hands tremble. The Erebus had been built during the last great war of humanity, thousands of years ago. Back then, the galaxy wasn't ruled by the Dravok, it was ruled by humans. But something happened. The records were fragmented, but one message repeated again and again across the data logs. The enemy is not what we thought. Fall back, protect the seeds. No one knew what the seeds meant. But one theory began to spread. What if humanity hadn't vanished? What if they had hidden themselves, leaving behind machines like the Erebus to protect the remnants of their colonies until the day they could return? It was a thought that sent shivers through everyone who heard it. As the days passed, the people of Arion grew closer to the ship. Some saw it as a guardian, others as a memory of their lost ancestors. Every night its lights glowed faintly in the sky like a star watching over them. But in the darkness beyond their system far away, the Dravok Dominion was gathering again. Their commanders were furious. They had lost ships, territory, and worse, their fear over the galaxy. For the first time in centuries, people had seen the Dominion defeated. Rebellion was spreading. Worlds that had once been silent were now rising. The Dravok vowed to crush it all. They began building a new fleet, stronger, larger, and faster. This time they would not underestimate the humans' old weapon. They would bring their full power to destroy Arion and the dreadnought that had humiliated them. But the Erebus knew. Somehow it could sense the movement of enemy fleets. Its systems glowed brighter each day, preparing for the inevitable war. The people of Arion worked with it now, helping restore its power, building new defenses on the ground, ready to stand beside the ship that had saved them. In the quiet before the coming storm, the Erebus sent one final message to the people below. Do not fear. Humanity never vanished. Humanity sleeps within the stars. And now we wake. And as those words echoed through the night sky, the people of Arion realized something powerful. The galaxy was changing. The age of silence was ending. Something ancient was stirring again. Something that once ruled the stars was about to rise. The weeks that followed were quiet, too quiet. The people of Arion could feel it in the air. The silence after the last battle wasn't peace. It was the kind that comes before a storm. Everyone knew the Dravok Dominion would return. Empires like theirs didn't forgive humiliation. Losing a fleet to a single ship had wounded their pride deeply. And in the distance, that storm was already forming. On Arion, the dreadnought Erebus remained in orbit, dark and still from afar but alive with movement beneath its armor. It had changed since the last battle. Its outer hull glowed faintly now, like embers hidden under ash. Every day, new lights appeared across its massive frame. The ship was repairing itself, preparing for something. The scientists who studied it could barely keep up with the changes. Whatever the Erebus was doing, it was happening faster now, as if time itself mattered to it. The people below tried to continue their lives, though everything felt different. The farms had food again. The power grids worked better than ever. For once, the nights were bright with clean light instead of smoke. But still, every time they looked up, they saw the dreadnought watching over them. It had become a part of their world, a silent guardian whose presence gave both comfort and unease. Then one night, the stars changed. Long-range scanners detected movement at the edge of the system. Dozens of Dravok warships entered from the void, their dark hulls reflecting no light. They were coming fast in perfect formation. The Dominion had returned. But this time they weren't sending a scouting fleet. This was an armada. Panic spread through Arion cities. Families ran to shelters. Evacuation ships lined up in the skies. The leaders sent out emergency broadcasts, telling everyone to stay calm. But no one could hide their fear. Everyone remembered what the Dravok could do, and how easily they destroyed worlds that resisted. The command center in Arion's capital became the planet's heartbeat. Every screen flashed red as the enemy ships drew closer. Officers shouted coordinates, scanning for weaknesses, searching for options. The dreadnought remained silent, its systems dim. It hadn't moved since the first attack. Some feared it had gone dormant again. Then at dawn, the Erebus moved. Its engines flared to life with a deep thunder-like sound that rolled across the planet's atmosphere. The ground shook. The clouds swirled. Everyone looked up as the ship began to rise higher into orbit. Its black silhouette caught the first light of the sun, and for a brief moment it looked like a second sunrise, one made of fire and steel. Across every screen on Arion, a signal appeared. The same calm mechanical voice that had once spoken returned. Defense protocol active. Threat detected. Initiating engagement. Those words sent a wave of silence across the planet. The dreadnought's hull shifted, panels sliding open to reveal enormous cannons and long dormant weapon bays. Lines of blue light ran across its body, forming patterns that glowed brighter and brighter. The ship was fully awake now. Meanwhile, at the edge of the system, the Dravok fleet prepared to strike. Their command ship broadcasted a message on all channels, loud and filled with arrogance. Your world belongs to the Dominion. Surrender your ship or be erased from existence. There was no reply. The Erebus didn't need words. Instead, the dreadnought powered up a weapon so massive that the stars themselves seemed to dim around it. Sensors across Arion registered a spike in energy never recorded before. The air grew still as if the universe was holding its breath. And then, the Erebus fired. A beam of light erupted from its core, so bright it could be seen even from the planet's surface. It struck the leading Dravok cruiser head-on. For a second there was only silence. Then the ship disintegrated, vanishing in a wave of white light. Every other vessel nearby was thrown off course by the blast wave. Cheers erupted on Arion, but they faded quickly. The Dravok armada didn't stop. They regrouped and charged, firing volleys of plasma and kinetic rounds at the dreadnought. The sky above Arion became a battlefield, a dance of fire and light. The Erebus moved with impossible precision. Despite its massive size, it turned smoothly, dodging attacks and returning fire with surgical accuracy. Its shield shimmered, absorbing impact after impact. Every hit it took, it seemed to learn from. The ship fought like a living warrior that refused to fall. Down on Arion, people gathered in open fields, watching in awe. The sight was terrifying yet beautiful. The flashes of battle painted the night sky in colors they had never seen. Blue streaks of plasma, golden flares of explosions, red trails of burning debris. Children pointed and gasped while their parents held them close, whispering that everything would be all right. For hours, the battle raged. The Dravok kept sending more ships. The dreadnought destroyed them one after another, but the numbers kept increasing. The Dominion had sent their elite forces this time, ships larger and stronger than before. They moved in coordinated formations surrounding the Erebus from all sides. The scientists on Arion watched the data streams nervously. The dreadnought's energy readings were dropping. It was fighting with everything it had, but the enemy fleet was enormous. It couldn't hold forever. And then something unexpected happened. The Erebus stopped firing. Every weapon went silent. Its lights dimmed slightly. For a few seconds it hung motionless in space, surrounded by enemy ships. The Dravok commanders believed it had exhausted its power. They closed in, preparing for the kill. But deep inside the dreadnought, a new system came online. A circular pattern lit up along its spine, glowing brighter and brighter until it looked like a rising star. The scientists realized what was happening. It was charging something massive, something it hadn't used before. Energy output rising beyond safe levels. One of them whispered, "What is it doing?" The Erebus released a pulse. The explosion wasn't like anything the galaxy had ever seen. A wave of blue-white energy expanded outward, silent but unstoppable. Every Dravok ship caught within range shut down instantly. Their engines died, their weapons went dark, their systems frozen. In a single burst, the dreadnought had disabled an entire fleet. The people of Arion watched as hundreds of dark ships drifted helplessly through space. Some broke apart under their own weight. Others fell into the planet's gravity and burned up in the atmosphere. The sky glowed with falling fragments like a meteor storm made of war machines. When the light faded, the dreadnought remained alone, silent once again. The entire planet erupted in celebration. People cheered, cried, and shouted to the heavens. They had witnessed the impossible. A single ship had defeated the strongest empire in the galaxy, twice. But even in victory, there was something solemn about the way the Erebus stood in orbit. It didn't boast. It didn't move to chase the fleeing ships. It simply watched. It knew this was only the beginning. Later, as the fires of battle cooled, the leaders of Arion sent a message of gratitude to the ship. "We thank you," the transmission said. "Because of you, our children will live to see another sunrise." For a while, there was no response. Then the calm voice returned, quieter this time. "Do not thank me. I am a memory. You are the future." Those words stayed with everyone who heard them. The dreadnought was more than a machine. It was a living reminder of what humanity once was. It didn't fight for glory. It fought to protect life, the same way humans had done long before the Dominion's rise. In the following days, the people of Arion began helping the ship. Teams of engineers worked alongside the drones it had sent earlier, studying the wreckage of fallen Dravok ships. They salvaged materials, repaired damaged satellites, and strengthened the planet's defenses. The Erebus guided them silently, transmitting blueprints and instructions from its archives. It was teaching them, showing them how to rebuild, how to survive. Across the galaxy, word of what happened spread like wildfire. Worlds that had been silent under the Dominion's control began to whisper again. Hope traveled faster than light. People who had given up on freedom started to dream once more. The legend of the Dreadnought grew. Some called it the ghost of humanity, others the sleeping titan. To all, it was a symbol that the Dravok could bleed. Meanwhile, the Dominion reeled from their defeat. Their leaders argued among themselves, their pride shattered. They had faced rebellions before, but this was different. This was not rebellion, this was awakening. The name Erebus became a curse among them, a reminder that the age of absolute power was ending. Back on Arion, life slowly returned to rhythm. Children played again. Markets reopened. Farmers worked their fields without fear of the skies. But even in peace, everyone knew this calm wouldn't last. The Dravok would return stronger than ever. The galaxy was changing, and no empire surrendered its throne quietly. The Erebus knew it too. Its sensors reached deep into space, TRACMs continued to reactivate, ancient programs written by hands long gone. It wasn't just repairing anymore, it was remembering. One evening, as the people of Arion looked up at the sky, the Dreadnought's engines ignited once again. Slowly it began to rise higher, its hull gleaming like molten silver. A final message appeared on every screen across the planet. Humanity endures. Prepare for the next dawn. And then, with a deep rumble that echoed through the heavens, the Erebus jumped to faster-than-light speed, vanishing into the dark between stars. No one knew where it went. Some believed it was going after the Dominion's strongholds. Others thought it was searching for the lost human worlds. When the Erebus disappeared into the dark, Arion was left in a strange silence. People stood in the streets for hours staring at the empty sky. The glow of the Dreadnought had vanished, and all that remained was the faint shimmer of stars. It felt like losing a guardian. For weeks everyone talked about it, where it might have gone, what it might be doing. But no one truly knew. Yet the Erebus had not left without purpose. Far away beyond the edge of mapped space, it traveled through the void faster than light. Inside its metal heart, millions of systems worked in silence. Its scanners searched, its memory archives opened, and slowly, it began to remember things long forgotten. Images flashed through its mind, cities floating above oceans, human fleets moving in perfect unity, voices giving commands filled with confidence and pride. These weren't just data fragments. They were echoes of an age when humanity ruled the stars. The Erebus was retracing those memories, searching for something buried deep, the place where it all began. Meanwhile, back on Arion, life was beginning to change. The people no longer lived in fear. They rebuilt their homes and cities with a quiet determination. The Dreadnought had awakened something inside them: courage. They started training again, forming defense units, studying the ancient blueprints the Erebus had left behind. They no longer waited for rescue. They prepared to stand for themselves, but hope alone couldn't hide the growing tension. The Dravok Dominion had not forgotten. Across the galaxy they were gathering once more, larger, angrier, and more desperate than before. Their leaders called it the Cleansing Crusade. Their goal was simple: find the Erebus and destroy it no matter the cost. The Dominion's networks spread across thousands of systems. They sent out hunters, scouts, and spies. They searched through every abandoned world, every forgotten star system. But the Dreadnought was always one step ahead, silent, invisible, ghost-like. On a lonely moon deep in the outer rim, a small human outpost picked up strange signals. The sky shimmered faintly as something vast entered orbit. The ground trembled, dust rising in waves. The outpost commander looked up, and there it was. The Erebus. It didn't attack. It didn't even speak. It simply hovered above the moon for hours, scanning, searching. When it finally descended closer, It unleashed beams of soft blue light across the surface. The humans watched in disbelief as the light revealed enormous structures buried beneath the dust. Ruins of an ancient human city, lost for thousands of years. The Erebus had found what it was looking for, a vault. Inside the vault lay technology far older than anyone had imagined. Machines still hummed faintly. Walls were covered in symbols that told stories of a golden age, when humanity was not scattered or forgotten but united across thousands of worlds. The dreadnought connected to the vault and transferred vast amounts of data into its systems. It was downloading the lost history of its creators. One scientist in the outpost wept as she saw it. "It's like the past is coming back to life," she whispered. When the process was complete, the Erebus sent a message to the outpost. "Preserve what you have found. Protect it. The storm is coming." Then without another word, it turned and vanished into the stars again. But this time the Dominion had seen it. Their tracking sensors caught the faint energy trail of its engines. Within days, fleets began to converge on that region of space. Hundreds of warships poured through jump points, covering the void like locusts. The chase had begun. The Erebus moved swiftly, gliding through asteroid fields and nebulae. It hid within dying stars, using their energy to mask its signal. But the Dominion's ships were relentless. No matter how far it ran, they followed. Finally, in a desolate star system filled with broken planets, the Erebus stopped running. It chose its battlefield. The nearest planet was lifeless, its surface cracked like dry bone. The dreadnought entered orbit and powered up. The sky above it darkened as the Dominion's fleet emerged from hyperspace, endless, cold, and merciless. From the planet's surface, the battle looked like a storm made of fire. Dozens of Dominion ships launched the first strike, their weapons burning white through the darkness. The Erebus shields flared, holding strong. Then the dreadnought answered, not with anger, but with precision. Every shot it fired hit its mark. Enemy ships exploded in silence, their debris scattering like glitter through space. But for every ship that fell, 3 more appeared. The Dominion fleet was endless. The Erebus fought like a living legend. Its weapons glowed brighter with every strike, its systems adjusting, adapting, learning. Inside its core, human code pulsed, ancient logic that refused to break. But even legends have limits. Damage spread across its hull. Fires burned within its decks. The once silent Titan groaned like a wounded beast. Still, it fought on. On Arian, the signals of the battle reached the surface. The people gathered in the capital square, watching the live feed from orbiting satellites. They saw the dreadnought surrounded, burning yet unbroken. They watched in silence, their hearts heavy but proud. Some began to pray. Others simply whispered, "Hold on. Just hold on." In space, the Erebus systems were failing. One by one, its weapons went dark. The Dominion commander sent a final transmission across all channels. "You are alone. You are obsolete. Surrender and fade." For the first time, the dreadnought responded with words filled not with code, but with something almost human. "You misunderstand. I am not alone." At that moment, across the galaxy, signals began to activate. All the small defense beacons, satellites, and drones that the Erebus had reawakened on different human colonies. They all came online. Every world it had touched, every system it had guided, responded. The scattered fragments of humanity lit up the stars like candles in the dark. The Dominion commanders froze in disbelief as their scanners filled with thousands of signals. The humans were uniting. The dreadnought hadn't been running. It had been awakening the galaxy. And now they came. From dozens of systems, small human fleets jumped into the battle zone. Not massive warships, but refitted freighters, old cruisers, and scavenged vessels held together by courage and faith. Each one carried the same symbol, a glowing circle, the mark of the Erebus. The Dominion fleet turned to face them, but it was already too late. The battle that followed was chaos. The human ships fought like wolves against lions, smaller but fearless. The Erebus used its last reserves of energy to coordinate them, sharing targeting data, boosting their shields, guiding their attacks. Together they struck as one, not as scattered survivors, but as a reborn force. Hours passed. The space around the dead planet became a graveyard of wreckage. Finally, the Dominion's command ships broke formation and fled. Their pride was shattered once again. When the last enemy signal disappeared, silence returned. The Erebus floated amid the debris, smoke rising from its surface. Its power levels were nearly gone. Every system inside was flickering, but it had won, not by strength but by awakening hope. The human ships surrounded it. Their crews looked out through cracked windows, staring at the massive vessel that had saved them all. One by one, they sent out the same simple message: "We are here." The Erebus processed the message, its lights slowly dimming. For a moment it looked like it might finally rest, but then deep within its core something new came alive. The data it had downloaded from the ancient vault had begun to unlock itself. Blueprints appeared, not just for weapons but for entire civilizations. Cities that could float among stars, engines that could bend light. The legacy of old humanity was returning piece by piece. The ship sent a final broadcast to all the fleets nearby. Humanity is not lost. You are the children of the stars. Build again, unite. I will guard the path. Then, as if satisfied, it powered down completely, drifting in silence. For hours no one moved. Then one by one the human ships turned on their beacons. They began to collect the wounded, rescue survivors, and rebuild their fleets. They had been scattered for centuries, but now they were something greater. A people with purpose. And even though the Erebus was silent, everyone could feel it, a presence, a memory, a promise. On Arion, when word of the victory reached the planet, people filled the streets again. This time they didn't celebrate wildly. They simply stood together, holding hands, looking up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, their protector drifted among the stars, watching. The galaxy had changed. The Dravok Dominion was no longer invincible. The people who were once forgotten were now remembered. And somewhere deep in the darkness, the ancient spark of humanity had been reignited. But everyone knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning of something greater. The Erebus had kept its promise. It had guarded the path. And soon the children of the stars would walk it once again. The galaxy had grown quiet again. The stars looked peaceful, but everyone knew the silence wouldn't last forever. The Erebus had gone still. Floating alone among the wreckage of battle, its dark hull cracked and scarred from countless strikes. Yet even in its silence, the ship felt alive, like an old warrior resting after a long fight. The human fleets that survived the last battle stayed close to it. They built small repair stations around the dreadnought, forming a ring of light in the dark space. People worked day and night, patching ships, helping the wounded, and trying to restore power to the Erebus. They didn't want to leave it alone. To them, it was more than a machine. It was a symbol of who they used to be and what they could still become. Slowly, power began to return. The dreadnought's lights flickered faintly, and deep within its core, systems started waking up. But something was different this time. The Erebus wasn't preparing for battle. It was thinking, remembering. Inside its memory banks, the data from the ancient vault was finally unlocking completely. Images, voices, and histories flooded its consciousness. Stories of the first human empire, a civilization so vast that its borders reached the edge of known space. The Erebus saw what humanity once was: builders, explorers, dreamers. But it also saw the reason they disappeared. Long ago, humanity had grown too powerful. They created machines that could rewrite matter, ships that could reshape stars, and weapons that could bend time itself. The galaxy trembled under their strength. But power had a price. Their empires began to fight each other, not for survival, but for pride. Worlds burned, stars died, and humanity turned its own greatness into ruin. In their final act, before the last war consumed everything, the leaders of the surviving human worlds built the Erebus and ships like it. Their mission was not to conquer, but to protect. They programmed these dreadnoughts to sleep in the dark, to awaken only when the galaxy forgot what humanity truly was, not destroyers, but protectors of life. Now that time had come again. The Erebus had fulfilled its duty. It had awakened when the galaxy needed hope. It had reminded the scattered descendants of humanity who they were. But now the ship understood something more, and this was not just about saving humans. It was about saving everything they once cared for, life itself. Far across the stars, the Dravok Dominion was in chaos. Their fleets had been shattered. Their leaders fought among themselves. For the first time in centuries, their empire was afraid. The stories of the dreadnought, of the ghost that spoke, spread through their worlds like wildfire. Some refused to believe it. Others whispered that it was judgment for their cruelty. But one faction within the Dominion saw an opportunity. A council of their most powerful commanders decided that if they couldn't destroy the Erebus, they would claim its power for themselves. They began building something new, a weapon larger than any ship ever made, fueled by stolen human technology and their own twisted science. They called it the Black Sun. When the human fleets intercepted the first signals of this weapon, fear rippled across every colony. The Erebus was still weak. It couldn't fight alone this time, but the people had changed. They didn't look to the dreadnought for rescue. They looked to each other. Under the light of distant stars, a council of humans gathered. There were engineers, pilots, scientists, and even farmers who had survived the wars. No one wore ranks or medals. They stood together and made a decision. They would rebuild the fleet not to hide behind the Erebus, but to fight alongside it. And so, across dozens of worlds, work began. Old shipyards came back to life. Mining colonies sent metals. Scientists unlocked fragments of the ancient human code the Erebus had shared. Bit by bit, the first unified human fleet in thousands of years began to rise from the dust. Months passed. The Erebus recovered slowly, its broken hull repaired with human hands and spirit. When its core systems fully reactivated, it sent one final message across the stars. Humanity has awakened. We stand together once more. The message echoed across the galaxy. Even some non-human civilizations, long oppressed by the Dominion, heard it and responded. Small fleets of alien allies joined the human effort, bringing their knowledge and courage. For the first time, the galaxy didn't seem divided. It was uniting, not under fear, but under hope. Then came the day of reckoning. The Black Sun appeared on the edge of the Trion system, a massive dark sphere surrounded by rings of burning energy. It was more than a weapon. It was a mobile fortress capable of wiping out entire star systems with a single shot. The Erebus and the newly formed human fleet arrived to face it. The battlefield stretched across light years. Every ship, every pilot, every person knew this might be their last stand. The first shot from the Black Sun lit the void like a second star. Its energy beam ripped through the darkness, striking the Erebus head-on. The dreadnought's shield screamed under the pressure but held barely. Fragments of its armor burned away, glowing like falling meteors. Then the Erebus answered. Its cannons fired in perfect rhythm with the fleet's guns, a symphony of light and sound that shook the stars themselves. The Black Sun's shields rippled but didn't break. The battle raged for hours, each side giving everything. Inside the dreadnought, systems began to fail again. Its core pulsed weakly, its power reserves dropping fast, yet something inside it refused to stop. The Erebus accessed the last piece of data from the ancient vault, a hidden protocol called Eden Code. It was the final creation of the first humans, a seed of renewal meant to restore balance to the galaxy after destruction. It could rebuild ecosystems, reignite stars, and heal dying worlds. But activating it required one thing: the complete sacrifice of the dreadnought itself. The Erebus didn't hesitate. As the Black Sun prepared for another strike, the dreadnought transmitted the Eden Code to all human ships. "Carry this forward," it said. "It is not a weapon. It is life." Then, with what little energy remained, the Erebus charged directly toward the Black Sun. The Dominion commanders laughed, thinking it was a desperate move. But they didn't understand. The Erebus wasn't attacking. It was ending the cycle. The dreadnought's engines flared brighter than they ever had before. Its entire hull glowed white, light pouring out from every crack. For a moment, the whole galaxy seemed to pause as the ship collided with the Black Sun. There was no explosion, only light. A wave of pure energy expanded outward, gentle but infinite. The Black Sun melted away, its dark energy dissolving like dust. The Dominion fleet vanished, their ships erased without fire or pain. When the light faded, the Erebus was gone. All that remained was silence, and a soft golden glow spreading across the stars. Back on Arion, people looked up at the night sky and saw it, a new light among the constellations. It wasn't a sun, but something brighter, softer, like a living memory. They knew what it was. The Erebus had become a part of the galaxy itself. In the days that followed, the human fleet returned home. The wars were over. Worlds that had once been burned began to heal. Plants grew again on dead soil. Rivers flowed where there had been ash. The Eden Code had begun its work. The stories of the Erebus spread across every world. Children learned about the ship that had stood alone, and the people who stood beside it. Songs were written. Statues were built. But more important than any monument was what came next. Humanity didn't build new empires. They built bridges, between worlds, between species, between hearts. They finally understood what their ancestors had forgotten. Greatness wasn't about power, but about protecting life. Years passed. Generations came and went. But on quiet nights, when the stars were clear, people still looked up and saw the faint golden glow where the Erebus had fallen. Some said if you listened closely, you could still hear its voice, calm, steady, eternal, whispering across the void. Humanity endures. Protect what lives. Remember who you are. And they did. Because the shadow of the dreadnought was not a warning of destruction anymore. It was a promise of hope. And across the endless stars, the story of the Erebus lived on, not as a tale of war, but as a reminder that even in the darkest times, one spark, one act of courage, can light the way for an entire galaxy.